A lot of the fun of Fort Wilderness is found right here in River Country. It's a newfangled version of the old swimming hole. And Huck Finn never had it so good.
Today, Walt Disney World is a huge spread-out resort with multiple parks, water parks, and shopping areas, but step back in time to the 1970s and the Walt Disney World Resort was a much more compact resort centered around the Magic Kingdom. It wasn't until well after Epcot's opening and under the command of Michael Eisner that Disney started to expand its resorts. The options for on-site resorts were the Contemporary, the Polynesian, both on the monorail loop, or the more moderately priced Fort Wilderness campgrounds.
Or even your very own treetop hideaway. Walt Disney World guests have a wide choice of villa accommodations.
It wouldn't be until 1988 when Disney would add 2 more resorts with the Grand Floridian and the Caribbean Beach Resort.
Stop and look and listen to what we tell you.
Stop and look and listen to what we say.
When the Magic Kingdom opened, the resort was an instant success and overwhelmingly popular. The Magic Kingdom itself was filled with different things to experience, but outside of the park, the resorts offered very little to do. You could swim or boat around Bay Lake, take a horse around Fort Wilderness, or ride around on the monorail, but none of these options were drawing guests to stay longer at the Disney resorts. Disney, though, had big plans for expansion with further hotels. When war broke out, though, in the Middle East, in 1973 it all changed. With gasoline rationing in effect throughout the country for the Walt Disney World Resort, a destination many guests drove to, attendance plummeted, along with nearly all other Central Florida tourist destinations. Construction on new projects were abandoned, hotels shut all around the area, and the area suffered in general. Disney had to adjust its marketing to try and attract more locals. Disney scraped by until the embargo was lifted on oil in March 1974. Many of the guests visiting the resort stayed in good neighbor hotels, as Disney at the time saw the surrounding growing tourism industry as support for its parks rather than competition, including competing parks such as Cypress Gardens. Previous plans for further hotels at the resort were scrapped completely and the attention turned to Fort Wilderness Campground.
But all the comforts of home are right next door to make roughing it easy, Walt Disney World style.
To try and attract people to stay longer within the Disney resort, Disney came up with 2 ideas. One, plans were made to turn a small island close to Fort Wilderness into an attraction by itself, known as Treasure Island, or as it was later known, Discovery Island. The second was a separately ticketed attraction that would create money but would also be marketed as an essential place to visit. Disney would create Florida's first themed water park. Just as how Disney had revolutionized the amusement park, Disney's water park wouldn't be just a collection of slides and pools, it would be a themed water park. As it had so many times before, Disney would draw inspiration from the works of Mark Twain, with the theme being an old-fashioned swimming hole, a place where Huckleberry Finn himself may have wanted to visit. To guests viewing the park, it would look like a natural extension of the nearby Bay Lake, with no separation at all, but this actually was not the case. While it appeared you were swimming in the water from the nearby lake, River Country's pool would be located a few feet higher than the nearby lake. Water would be drawn in from Bay Lake via a filter pipe inside the theme mountain in the park, and travel down the park's flumes, allowing guests to slide down into the pool, but also be a constant top-up of fresh water, keeping the water inside the park as safe for swimming as possible. Because of this higher height of the park, filtered clean water could escape back into Bay Lake, but the dirty lake water could not come back in the other direction. The rockwork for the park was built by legendary Imagineer Fred Yoga, who is actually responsible for nearly all of the rockwork within Magic Kingdom on opening day. The park was all hand sculpted with sandy beaches to really give you the impression you were in a natural swimming hole. Getting to the park itself was a journey. The same way if you visit the Hoop-de-Doo Revue today, which I highly recommend that you do, you would arrive by car to park at the front of Fort Wilderness. Then you would hop on a bus, tram, or in the early years, the Fort Wilderness Railroad, a 4/5 scale operational steam train that ran through the Fort Wilderness campground. The railroad operated until the early 1980s until it was closed. The reason for its closure were never confirmed, but rumors suggested that it was either due to issues with fuel capacity, bad track conditions, or that a young girl was hit by the train while riding her bicycle. Whatever the reason though, the trains themselves were later reused as the ticket booths for Pleasure Island Resort at Downtown Disney.
And River Country is a slippin', slidin', all-American water park with all the simple pleasures that Huck Finn only dreamed of.
On opening day, admission to the park was $4, which today, with inflation, would be around $17. Quite a lot cheaper than anything currently being offered at the Disney World Resort, for a much more intimate experience. As you entered the park, the main service building offered changing rooms, restrooms, and showers. The park was 6.5 acres in size and featured a modest amount of attractions. These included slippery slide falls, 2 water slides that left you flying through the air 7 feet into the Upstream Plunge. Upstream Plunge was the only heated pool in this natural swimming hole. One half was for slippery slide falls and the other half was designated for swimming. Whitewater Rapids was a 330-foot long inner tube river ride, an attraction that started out similar to a lazy river before taking a high-speed trip down into the pool below, Bay Cove. Bay Cove was the half-acre sand-bottom lake which appeared to be directly connected to Bay Lake. Surrounded by a sandy beach, it featured different activities such as a tire swing and rope climbs, all swinging you out over Bay Cove before you dropped in. The area also featured kiddies areas and a nature trail to walk around. The pool itself reached up to 6 feet deep at its deepest location, where the slides dropped out. You could take 2 different ways to reach the slides. The Barrel Bridge, a bridge made from, barrels similar to the one located on Tom Sawyer Island, or the Bay Bridge, famously seen from anyone looking at the park from Bay Lake. The slide was called Whoop and Holler Hollow. 2 fiberglass slides, one at 260 feet long and another at 160 feet long. Food-wise, the park allowed you to bring in your own food and offered a place to eat at Pop Willow's picnic area. Pop Willow Grove was actually the working title for the park during its creation. If you prefer to buy your food, Pop's Place served fried chicken, hot dogs, french fries, and ice cream. Another option was the smaller watering hole, which also serves snacks. The park held its grand opening in June 1976, just 6 months before the opening of another large water park in the area, Wet n Wild. President Ford's daughter officiated the opening, and the experiment into opening a water park proved a huge success. In the 1976 Disney Annual Report, they boasted that the park had seen 4,700 guests per day in its opening year. The park's success, though, also hinted at the early signs of the park's demise. The park often reached capacity and was unable to accept new guests for the day. River Country operated as usual towards the end of the season in 2001, expected to reopen the following spring.
All right, folks, we are going to head up top to the main beach of the Splash Pond. Everyone follow us again. We're going to go right up top of the Splash Pond. Goofy's going to test the water, show you some of his new swimming strokes.
In April 2002, though, the Orlando Sentinel reported that Walt Disney World's first water park, River Country, has closed and may not reopen. Spokespeople for the resort stated the park could reopen if there was enough demand. Just 2 months later, Disney announced the park would remain closed throughout 2002. It wasn't until 3 years later, in January 2005, Disney finally announced the park would never reopen again. Since then, fans have argued about the reason the park closed, and Disney never officially commented on the reason. River Country was actually quite a rough park. It was themed to be with rocks and sand and stone all over and a natural habitat. The slides were not smooth, and many people reported being injured on them. Considering the park's lifetime, though, it seems unlikely this is the main reason for its closure. Another idea said for its closure was competition. Just down the road was the increasingly popular George Méliès built Wet n Wild, often referred to as America's first water park. Until the mid-80s, though, Disney saw its local attractions as a support for the business. Disney themselves stated that they could not build everything themselves and welcome people in the area. This changed, though, when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells took over. Not only did prices for Disney rise, but the hotels and attractions around the area became competition. Disney now wanted to control it all and keep guests at their resort.
I wish I was less competitive.
Michael Eisner was happy to take what others were trying to do and do it himself. The Living Seas opened at Epcot to try and compete with SeaWorld, who Disney had welcomed with open arms back in 1973. Universal was planning a studio theme park in Florida, but Eisner made his move to counter this also. No longer happy to see guests leave to visit Wet 'n Wild, which was larger and offered more thrilling attractions, Disney would build its own bigger water park, Typhoon Lagoon.
Here's an update on an attraction currently under construction at Walt Disney World, Typhoon Lagoon.
Hey, that's old news! Typhoon Lagoon is open now! And it's the coolest place in all of Florida.
Typhoon Lagoon opened in 1989, much larger than River Country and offering many more attractions, which the company could charge a lot more for these offerings. It combined the best aspects of Wet 'n Wild with Disney's own vision for story and theming, a new essential destination for guests and a reason to not head outside to other parks, including their own. After the success of Typhoon Lagoon, 6 years later another large water park was built, Blizzard Beach. It could again accommodate more guests and charge a much higher entrance fee.
Now, the honorary mayor of Blizzard Beach, Helmut Kohl.
Good morning. Good morning. How is everybody? Excellent. Good. We are so very glad you could all be with us here today.
The change in stance and the opportunity for more profit must have been a large part of the reason for the closure of River Country. So you can essentially blame Michael Eisner for this one.
I always thought that if I got fired, and when you're in my business, you always wait to get fired. It's like being a coach of a baseball team.
You wait to get fired?
Other reasons could include the location. With a lack of parking and a long distance to travel to actually reach the park, which made sense back in 1976 at the much smaller Walt Disney World, but by 2001 the logistics of the resort had changed. Now hotels were spread all around Walt Disney World, and transport to the park became a hassle. With its less than 5,000 capacity a day, now running on a seasonal schedule since most of the pools were unheated, without some kind of big expansion to the park, it just could not compete with profit-making Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach. Often referenced in the closure of River Country is the rare freshwater amoeba found in Florida's freshwater or lake areas. The amoeba actually did cause the death of a child swimming in the water park in 1980. No other cases of the amoeba had occurred in the lifetime of River Country though, and the disease has a fatality rating of 95%. So if this was the case, surely it would have happened a lot sooner. This is actually often stated as the main reason the park closed, and backed up by the fact Disney no longer allows swimming in the lakes around the Magic Kingdom. But considering the park ran for 21 years after this incident, it's highly unlikely this is the cause for the park's closure. The closure of the park also relates to the tourism decline after the September the 11th attacks. Attendance to the resort as a whole plummeted, and drastic actions were forced. Staff were laid off and hours cut back, projects were put on hold or abandoned, and it's reasonable to assume a mixture of all these different issues sealed the fate of River Country. While many of these changes were temporary, River Country remained permanently closed. It seems less likely to do with health and safety and more likely to do with profits and a Walt Disney World resort that had simply outgrown its small natural watering hole at the back of the campground.
Hi, I'm here at River Country to experience the All-American Water Party. This old-fashioned All-American celebration is the only opportunity where our guests can experience a water park and pal around with Goofy, Pluto, Chip 'n Dale, and Minnie Mouse all at the same time.
While not officially confirmed to never reopen until 2005, it stood abandoned from 2001 till 2005, awaiting maintenance that never came. Disney, rather than spending money to demolish the park, just left it sitting there, fenced off. This hand-sculptured, man-made natural watering hole began to be retaken by nature. The walkways were left overgrown and rotten. The hand-sculptured rocks by the legendary Imagineer sat cracked and damaged, and the old pools sat decaying. The pools sat fenced up, but still a liability for anyone close by. It wasn't until 2016 Disney finally began draining the pools and filling them in, 15 years after the park had closed. Throughout the years, many different plans have been found for the site, mostly including new resorts or expansions of the DVC offerings since its location is directly between Fort Wilderness and Wilderness Lodge. In 2018, codenamed Project 89, plans were found for the site hinting at a new hotel for the area, with construction estimated to begin in 2019, comprising of 1,360 rooms. Personally, I would love to see elements of the park restored as part of a new resort's pool, but judging by the plans, it seems very unlikely. Until this is officially confirmed though, River Country still sits abandoned. River Country was hugely popular during its opening decade. People have fond memories of the water park, although it was a little rough around the edges. A true place of Disney history and the Disney World of the past. The area has become a great place of myth and speculation throughout the years, which unfortunately will soon meet its final demise. Florida's true first water theme park. Thank you so much for watching this video on Expedition Extinct. Please let us know your thoughts on River Country, and if you have visited, please share your memories with us in the comments below. If you would like to join us on future expeditions, be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter for information on upcoming stops. If you would like to support the channel and get early video releases, please do check us out on Patreon with a link below in the description. We will see you next time.
I want to go straight to River Country. Me too. Let's go.
First we'll check in, then we head for River Country.